Today we have my brother, Terrance Woodbury, who is a genius when it comes to numbers. He actually deals with data, and Terrance is actually not very well suited for like your casual conversations or social media because he deals in fact. Like the shit Terrance talks about is like real life stuff. And so he's a good friend of mine, good brother, but for some of these conversations that you all are going to have with this information, it's not, I believe that XYZ. Terrance is here to give you the full truth. So what's happening, Terrance? How you feeling, brother?
What's up, Bakari, man? Thanks for having me. I don't like to talk about my opinion. That ain't what people want to hear from me. They want to hear about the opinion of the voters that we're talking to, the voters that are determining the outcome of these elections. So that's what I'm here to talk about.
Yeah. So my first question is a very big question, and one I believe is a few things. About two-thirds to 75% of voters felt like they were better off 4 years ago than they were today. 2 million Black voters stayed home. Trump improved slightly in areas where we saw a lot of voters for Kamala stay home. That's my opinion. But what does your data tell you about what the fuck happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to that. Look, voters were very, very frustrated. About 7 out of 10 Black voters said their lives have gotten worse. I'm sorry, 7 out of 10 said their lives had either stayed the same or gotten worse over the past 4 years, was not getting better. And that was our number one piece of messaging advice to the whole campaign is that we have to acknowledge their pain, right? We can't just tell them that the economy is better. We can't tell them that their lives are better when they feel a very different lived reality. But not only do we have to acknowledge that pain, but we have to give a reason and explanation for it. Why are their lives not getting better no matter how hard they're working? And I feel like that's where we missed the ball. We just have to give a better reason. We have to give a reason in the first place. And I think that's where we got a lot of correcting to do in the future, man.
What were your focus groups telling you before the election? Outside of those things, but uh, I know you deal with the voters who determine the outcomes. And let me also preface this by saying that the three largest demographics who voted for Kamala Harris, as always, were number one, Black women, number two, Jewish voters, number three, Black men. So let's not fall into a lot of these normal tropes. But what were they telling you before the election? And I guess even more important, did Quentin and JOD and the others, did they listen to you?
Yeah, well, of course, they were expressing quite a bit of frustration and pain. Look, I believe that men of color are emerging as the new swing voters in American politics. Men of color shifted the most, both in turnout and who actually
What you
voted.
mean, what you mean by men of color? Because there are a
Men
lot
of
of
color.
people, there are a lot of folk who like, look, I'm tired of, listen, y'all voted for him. Y'all got to put up with these next 4 years of pain. If he deports or cuts back on jobs or whatever it is, I'm not men of color. I'm Black, and this is what happens when everybody doesn't sing from the same sheet of music.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, no, you're not wrong, but some of the reason that we've seen this erosion amongst Black men, Latino men, and AAPI men and their support for Democrats, not just for Kamala Harris, this has been erosion that's been happening over 2 or 3 cycles. This is not first time talking about this, Bakari. And some of that erosion, while there is significant differences amongst these groups of voters, there's some similarities, right? That men of color, Black men, Latino men, value things like masculinity, spirituality, family, patriotism, these values that have far too often been ceded to Republicans. I had a young Black man tell me in a focus group in Georgia that anytime he sees an American flag waving on somebody's house, he knows they're white and he knows they're Republican. Well, we're not going to be able to cede patriotism or spirituality. Most importantly, we can't cede God to Republicans.
Like, can I just put a pin in that? And when I ran in 2014 for lieutenant governor, one of the things you're right. I think this actually started not because of, but during the same time as Barack Obama, right? And one of the things that I told my campaign is that we're not going to allow the GOP to mean God's only party.
That's right. That's right. Listen, my father, who is a captain in the reserves, who still cries every time he hears the national anthem, goes to church twice a week. I'm trying to make this clear to Democrats that his spirituality, his family, his patriotism, he values all of those things more than he values the Democratic Party. And he's only voted for Democrats his whole life. But we are going to have to reclaim those things. I think there are ways to to package our progressive value, our progressive issues through these types of values. And one of those examples of that is how we talk about God. You know, if God grants us all freedom of choice, then why should we be granting women any less than that? There are ways to just reclaim these things and to make sure that folks know that all masculinity isn't toxic, and that while society is evolving, there's a very important role for men and for masculinity in this evolving society.
Let me ask you this question. And this is a very big question, which you're going to be like, Bakari, stop asking such a sensationalized, dumbass question. But it's my show, so I get the chance to do that. Can a woman do that?
Yeah, I think so. And look, here's the example that I've been giving post-election. Look, I think that assigning all of men's reluctance to vote for Kamala Harris, any man that was reluctant, assigning all of that to sexism, I believe is lazy. That's a lazy mischaracterization
I,
of
I agree. It's intellectually lazy too.
it's lazy. It's lazy. But the
To
truth is,
discount it though is also intellectually dishonest.
it's dishonest. But the truth is, Bakari, in focus groups with black men, I would sometimes hear questions about whether or not a woman should be president. This isn't most black men, this isn't all black men, but in every group there was at least one. And so what I would do in these focus
Barbershop.
groups,
I've been talking. I mean, we literally in a barbershop, people, men with kids would say, "What happens when her period comes on?" Like just
but
the
another
bottom
thing they would
level of
say, they would also say, look, I don't mind a woman being president, but what if other countries don't respect us, right? What if other countries attack us? What if she makes emotional decisions? And these are the same men that would tell me they cherish black women. They believe black women are the most underprotected, most attacked in society. And so there's a difference between sexism, which is hostile and oppressive, and patriarchy, which is taught in church, in Bible study, and these are men that tell me that God says that man is head of household, and who is he and who are they to tell God he was wrong? The difference is, Bakari, we never had a conversation with those men. We wagged our finger at them. We said, "How dare you?" But when Barack Obama was running for president, and he realized that racism had the potential to undermine his candidacy, he had a conversation with white America. He didn't wag their finger at him and say, "Shame on you." He said, even my grandmother, who I love more than anybody in the world, held unconscious bias. And this is an opportunity for the country to rise above that. Well, we didn't have that conversation with men of color, with black men, with Latino men, about how gender is evolving in society, how there is a very important role for masculinity, but that all of us are going to have to be a part of this evolution. We didn't have that conversation. We told them,
why was they? Why you keep saying we didn't have that conversation? I recall sending and circulating to you and others a memo about a black male agenda, and it thanks to Brian and Tony and others, she adopted it and changed it a little bit, pulled it a little bit, added some old stuff, put some new stuff in, but we were able to do it. What else could have been done along that? I mean, I thought that maybe she never had a Barack Obama Philadelphia moment.
mm-hmm,
And he gave the speech on race, which was his
that's
most
right.
powerful speech. I've always talked that maybe that was the missed moment. I also don't think anything she could have done, one individual event would have changed the outcome of this race. I just thought the headwinds were too much in hindsight. But what more could they have done to maybe narrow those margins?
Yeah, and to be clear, Bakar, the efforts that were taken certainly closed the margin that she inherited. Joe Biden had a 12 to 15 point gender gap amongst black men when he passed the candidacy to her, and she closed that by 7 or 8 points. And I do think that the black men's agenda, the first presidential candidate in history to have an agenda specifically for black men, that engaging black men and on platforms and with trusted messengers like yourself and like many of the others that the campaign employed, that did help to close the gap. But the missing part to me was exactly what you just said, that deeper conversation about the role of black men in society, about the role of men in society, about how those roles are evolving. I think that Philadelphia moment was important. I think that her or Tim Walz could have done that, right? Imagine a conversation with Tim Walz having with America about, what locker room talk looks like in a positive locker room, in a locker room where black men understand their role and the role that they have in protecting and defending our society, that those conversations we just didn't have. We avoided some of the hardest conversations about who she was, about her identity. And that's why I just think it's bullshit now that we're scapegoating that all of this is because of identity politics. Because in fact, I think that we veer too far away from some of those identity politics.
I mean, we didn't do identity politics. You know who did run a campaign of identity politics? Donald Trump. What she did not never do, what she never did not never. I sound about like you trying to pronunciate scapegoat. What she didn't ever do was say, I will be the first woman to be president. I will be the first Black woman to be president or Indian American woman to be president. She never said those things. In fact, she kind of took the pluff, which I don't necessarily disagree with at all, actually. She took the Pluff Axelrod playbook of you can see the identity on them. And she did a complete 180 from what Hillary Clinton did. When I remind people all the time, one of the problems Hillary Clinton had was that when people had the bumper stickers that said, I'm with her, she made the campaign about the candidate and not the voter because everybody wanted to be with her. She wasn't for them, which brings me to this ad that I've spoken about with Shermichael Singleton, Morehouse brother. I still claim him, Terrance.
Love Michael. We got
I
different
love
politics, but I love
actually
it.
I love Shermichael too, actually. And David Axelrod and others. But talk about that ad about the nuances of the ad, how it moved voters from one side to the other, about transgender support that Kamala Harris had. And it made her look or reinforce the San Francisco liberal, but it also ended with she's for they, them, I'm for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that ad was masterful, and it did a couple of things, right? It to your point, it made her seem radically progressive on issues that not all of society has evolved around to. But the other thing that it did, and this is frankly what Donald Trump did with all of the identity politics, right? He connected that the cultural anxiety around issues that folks may not fully understand. He connected that with their economic anxiety. And so the trans ad was as much about people's discomfort with trans people as it was about using tax dollars, right, to pay for trans surgeries. And that was his effective way of giving them a reason for their pain. The reason your life sucks is because they're using your tax dollars to pay for those people's surgeries. They're using your tax dollars to pay for those foreign wars, or immigrants are taking, as he would call, black jobs, right? So all of this identity politics was always tied to economic anxiety, and that's where I think we're going to have to respond with, look, he wants you to believe that we are each other's biggest problem, when in fact the reason your life is not getting better is because billionaires and corporate interest are rigging the system against you. And that feels like that would have been so easy this time, as we're running against a billionaire whose vice president was chosen by Peter Thiel, a billionaire who's got a billionaire Elon Musk on stage with him every damn day buying votes for $1 million a pop, that we weren't able to make that connection to voters, that the reason that their lives are not getting better is not because people that are different from them. It's because of billionaires that are actually rigging the system, and shit. And we brought the F around and find out just how much they rigged the system in the next 4 years.
Listen, we've already seen Elon Musk wealth go up hundreds of
100
percent.
million,
Even
$100 million.
he only spent $150 million to buy a presidency. That ain't even that expensive. If you had a magic wand, what five things would you change about how the Democratic Party speaks and delivers to the nation over the next? Because we don't have 4 years. You
Yeah.
have. I keep including Louisiana in this, and I'm wrong, but you have, because Louisiana's off year, but it's not this off year. It's next off year. You have New Jersey,
Virginia.
Virginia coming up.
Yeah, we also have very, very important Supreme Court races in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. As we know, these Supreme Courts, most of the what Kamala Harris would call the hard-fought freedoms that are at risk right now, most of them are going to be decided in states, right? And so we got to win these Supreme Court
But we
battles.
didn't. We don't have the United States House of Representatives because of the maps drawn courtesy of the North Carolina State Supreme Court.
That's right. So there's a couple things we have to do. First, I think we have to reclaim the values that are important to men of color and to people of color. Spirituality, masculinity, patriotism. We have to reclaim that. We also have to give people a reason for their economic pain. Again, I think that reason is our billionaires and corporate interests are rigging the system against you. That's why we can't raise minimum wage. That's why we can't reduce prescription cost. That's why your healthcare premiums are out of control. It's because of billionaires and corporate interests. I think we have to have a hard conversation about the evolution of society. I think we have to set a vision for America, and how Democrats see this country. How do we see diversity? How do we see gender? How do we see race? How do we see those things in America? Because the other side is laying out a vision for how they see those things, and they see them as our problem. And I'm not sure the Democrats have really presented that. And frankly, we're going to have to bring people along on some of these along a journey on some of these issues, right? We're going to have to bring them along a journey of immigration, explaining how, in fact, we have not gotten immigration right every time in this country, but immigration does a great value and benefit to America. I think there's just, there are things like that that we're just going to have to continue to. There are conversations that we have not been having with all of America. And then the last thing I think is, look, Democrats are going to have to we're going to have to pick some priorities here. We're not going to be able to fight every battle. We're not going to be able to win every voter. And when we spend, weeks at a time with Liz Cheney chasing Republicans, and we don't do a single point better with Republicans, then I think we got to reprioritize our base. We got to reassemble that base, young people, people of color, men of color that have been eroding, not just in this election, but have been eroding over time. We're going to have to reassemble that base, and that's going to take time, resources, and priorities.
I'm not mad at the Liz Cheney gambit, but I thought we would have more bang for our buck with that. I totally misread that. I thought the 5 to 6% would have been 8 to 9% of Republican voters, at least in Pennsylvania or Michigan, where we honed in on that. Let me ask you this question.
I mean, but the truth is, because we haven't done, as much as we're spending trying to persuade conservative and even moderate white voters, our margins with Democratic margins with white voters haven't changed more than 2 or 3 points this century. Not two or three point time, not two or three
But
points.
also Kamala Harris did better with white voters than any Democratic president in recent history, not named LBJ. Am I right about that?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, but that's 1 point better, right? That's a lot of votes. It's still the largest segment of the electorate, but we did almost 20 points worse with Latino voters, right? 8 points worse with AAPI voters. That's our base. And some folks say you got to do both. It's not zero sum. Unfortunately, Bakari, resources are zero sum. Time is zero sum. And look, this is the craziest shit we see in the data is that votes are actually zero sum, that the more diverse an electorate becomes, the more white people vote for Republicans. I mean, it's a direct correlation. For every 1 point more diverse the electorate becomes, white people vote for Republicans 1 point higher. That is as zero sum as it gets, bro. We're gonna have to make some hard priority decisions here. That is wild. So that's
I
gonna
mean,
force us to make some decisions here.
can AOC on one side or Gavin Newsom on the other, or Big Gretch, or Raphael Warnock, or Wes Moore, can they navigate this new terrain that nobody knows what is successful and what that success looks like?
I mean, look, I'm certainly not about to cast my primary ballot this early. I think we have a deep and talented and
I
diverse.
don't even think that the person who will be our nominee or president, oh, because you just have to beat JD, and JD's not Trump when it comes to these voters. Trump is Trump, and it doesn't. Those two things, Trump voters, as we've seen, particularly in the 6 out of 7 swing states, they don't follow the ticket. They follow Donald Trump.
That's right.
So I'm not sure. Like if you would have asked me in 2004, who would have been president of the United States, nobody would have said Barack Obama.
That's right.
So I think that's where we are.
I mean, I think that's right. Look, there's a lot of talent in this bench. Every candidate, every elected official you just named has, they have some unique advantages and benefits. I do think that the most successful candidate is going to be a candidate that's not defending the system, but is pointing out what's wrong with it and radically trying to reform it. That's where we are. That's where Democrats are
But
underperforming.
Bernie Sanders can't win black votes.
I mean, I don't think that that's exactly true, Bakari. There's a lot of black, he didn't do as well
I
as he
was just going based upon his two previous elections. I'm not, and I was Bernie Sanders ain't running for president again, but I was just pushing back on your premise there.
Yeah, look, I would like to prove this in the data, but I bet you some of the Biden Trump voters and even some of the Hillary Clinton Trump voters, some of those are previously Bernie voters, and that's very hard for Washington to
I
understand.
can see that. But what I don't necessarily see are the primary voters that we're talking about, the
That's
choosing.
right.
A mama and her
That's
friends,
exactly right.
they ain't really voting
That's
for
right.
radical change.
That's exactly right. And look, that a part of what Bernie Sanders is able to do is reach to a voter that's cynical, that doesn't believe the system is working, that offers to blow that system up radically. Those folks don't vote in primaries, and that is Bernie's problem.
That's exactly right. His path was always extremely narrow because they're not coming out to vote on a Tuesday in March.
That's right.
They just that those are not his voters. The last question for you is I thank you so much for joining me and spending some time with me. And I could have you on the show all the time. I'm sure this one's going to do numbers, but how do we break through in this current information climate? Um, I just think that we're just getting our ass beat when it comes to the platforms by which we disseminate our messaging. And I was lazy in believing that PodSave, for example, was going to be the antithesis, right? I didn't actively utilize my platform enough or understand some of the other non-traditional, she went on Shannon Sharp, right? I mean, that actually probably didn't move many numbers as many as we thought. But Donald Trump made a concerted effort with the Aiden Rosses of the world, with the Joe Rogans of the world to go out and disseminate information in new platforms. How
Hmm.
do we change that? Because the most consequential thing that happened in this race, and I'm writing about this in my new book, but the most consequential thing was um, oh boy buying Twitter.
That's right. I mean, Elon Musk has got a great way at continuing to fragment and break our information ecosystem. And I do think that that's one of the biggest disservices of our biggest challenges of our body politic right now is that we're all making decisions based on different sets of facts. And they are delivering those facts through an information ecosystem that they control, that they own. Look, Donald Trump's narrative and message isn't just perpetuated during Donald Trump's campaign. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, throughout the year. And that's a part of what we're going to have to do. I do think that Crooked and the Pod Save guys are onto something. I think that is the beginning. But that's a huge and diverse ecosystem. It's not just Breitbart, right? There are dozens of publications and local media, and progressives are going to have to own the means of communication. We're going to have to continue to create these platforms. And most important, we're going to have to deliver these messages year round. We have to remember that the swing voters that are deciding the outcome of these elections are the most cynical voters in the electorate. They're the double haters. They don't like either party. They don't like either candidate. And so for a cynical voter, mis and disinformation is extremely um, believable because they're trying to make sense of their pain. And that pain can't just be because of them. My life doesn't suck because of me. And so mis and disinformation is becoming more and more pervasive, but also more and more effective. And the only way to combat it is not during the campaign cycle. You got to combat that shit year round.
How do culture wars or, you had Kyle Rittenhouse, now you have Daniel Penny. How do those things now you have a handsome person who is being glorified on Twitter because he has abs and eyebrows, but he murdered an individual, right? He literally murdered somebody in cold blood, and we're holding him up as a beacon for the broken healthcare system. How do we navigate this system of culture wars that Democrats continuously lose?
I mean, this is the part that
And Nancy Mace running around with the
And
bullhorn.
Nancy Mace. Yeah, this is the part that scares me the most, Bakari. And frankly, it's scaring America. In every focus group, I ask the same question. The first question I ask is, what's keeping you up at night? And Americans are terrified of division, right? In every focus group across America, I'm hearing the word civil war more and more consistently. And when I ask what that means, do you mean like actual blood in the streets? People will die. that is exactly what people are beginning to anticipate. And so this level of division, of vitriol, um, I don't know that I have a solution for it, but I do know that it threatens to shake America at its core. And obviously the next 4 years. And here's the real problem is that the zero-sum politics of the right are permeating the left. And when we lose, right, even Democrats are trying to make sense of our pain right now. And we look at stuff like 17-point drop off amongst Latino voters. And black folks say, see, look, it's y'all, not us. All of that is contributing to the same zero-sum division that our problems are caused by you and that we're not actually in this together. I don't know the solution to that, Bakari, but the person that does is probably going to be the next Democratic nominee for president.
Hope they're listening to the show. Terrance Woodbury, thank you for joining the Bakari Sellers Podcast. As always, this has been more insightful than you can possibly imagine. Enjoy your trip, be safe, and have a blessed and happy holiday and New Year.
I appreciate you, brother. Keep doing what you're doing.